Okay, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone had a relaxing holiday weekend. My name is Jacob Foskell, and I'm the Title 20 Manager for the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I'm joined today by Jessica Funk. We are excited for the opportunity to discuss the Social Services Block Grant. This webinar is designed to prepare County Board staff for submitting grant agreements for the upcoming fiscal year. We will also tackle some questions and issues related to the Title 20 program. Everybody today is muted, so if you do have questions at any time, feel free to submit them in the questions bar located on the webinar pop-up. You can also use the chat bar. If your question isn't addressed today, we'll send out a document later going through all of the questions. As a reminder, the webinar will be recorded, and it's going to be made available at a later date. We'll make the PowerPoint slides available as well. Here's what we're going to cover in today's webinar. We will start by providing a brief overview of the Title 20 program. This will include information on the funding formula that DODD uses to estimate county allocations. We will then broadly review the grant agreement and its attachments. After that, we'll review some specific areas of the grant agreement and address some common questions that we receive. We will also look at a scenario based on an actual Title 20 experience and provide guidance on how to approach choosing the right decision. The Social Services Block Grant is also known as Title 20 of the Social Security Act. The program is housed in the Office of Community Services and the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is a block grant program, meaning that the federal government establishes broad program goals while giving the states flexibility to determine how these goals are achieved. Title 20 is not a dollar-for-dollar reimbursement program. Subrecipients report billable expenditures and can receive reimbursement up to their allocation amount, which is estimated annually. The billing process occurs quarterly through the Title 20 web application, or Title 20 app. The Title 20 program year is the federal fiscal year, which runs from October 1st through September 30th. This slide gives a big picture look at how the Title 20 funds travel from the federal level to local providers. At the top, we have the Department of Health and Human Services. They are the federal awarding agency. The Ohio Department of Job and Family Services is the prime recipient of the funds. DODD receives about 14% of the total annual award to Ohio. DODD passes the funds to the county boards and other eligible subrecipients who have the option of subgranting or subcontracting the delivery of Title 20 services. This slide lists the program goals that Title 20 funds support, as defined by the federal government. They are ranked by how restrictive each goal is, with 1 being the least restrictive and 5 being the most restrictive. Each goal is addressed by 1 or more services provided by Title 20. Here is a list of billable services under DODD's Title 20 program. The rates, units, and definitions are defined in Exhibit A of the grant agreement. DODD has established standard rates for each service. The types of services available range from employment to education to early intervention, and many more. For federal fiscal year 2017, there are no new services or major changes to existing services. Now, let's review annual allocations. Each county receives an estimated allocation at the start of the new fiscal year. This estimate is based on the anticipated total federal award multiplied by a county's allocation percentage. The allocation percentage is derived from a formula that meets certain federal requirements. The allocation percentage for DODD's program is calculated using 4 county-level variables: poverty rate, unemployment rate, tax millage, and active IDS totals. A county's poverty rate has the largest potential impact on its allocation percentage at 50%, while the tax millage only accounts for 5%. The data for the allocation formula is collected annually by DODD using prior year data. The allocations are estimated because when we receive our federal award letters, we receive them quarterly. Therefore, the actual award amount that DODD receives can vary from our estimates. Are we still okay with the audio? We've had one or two issues with the audio. Okay, we'll keep moving forward. If you have any more issues with the audio, please just let us know in the chat bar. Title 20 operates on a reimbursement basis. Each quarter, counties report their expenditures via the Title 20 app. If a county has reported more expenditures than their total allocation, then they will receive the allocation amount. If they report expenditures less than their allocation, the county will receive only what they have spent. County has had the entire year to meet their full allocation. So if a county underspends in the first quarter, but is able to bill a lot of activity in the second, third, or fourth quarter, the county could potentially recoup their full allocation. During the fourth quarter, all unspent funds will be reallocated to counties that exceeded their allocations. We are approaching the new federal fiscal year. Counties will sign new grant agreements and receive several documents. In this part of the webinar, we will review all of the documents so that you can have a better idea of where to look when you have a particular question. Here is a comprehensive list of the documents that you will receive related to the next fiscal year. There is the grant agreement itself, along with 2 addendums. There are also 6 exhibits that provide more detailed information and guidance in specific areas. Also, please be sure to share these materials with any relevant coworkers or staff who work on Title 20 at the local level. The grant agreement is the most important document that you will receive. It provides each county's estimated allocation, documentation requirements for the grant, reporting deadlines, terms and conditions. We have highlighted the following sections for your convenience to review. Section 1.2 contains the estimated annual allocation for each county. Section 1.4 discusses the quarterly reporting schedule. Sections 3.1 through 3.8 all outline documentation requirements. Section 6 establishes contact information for both DODD and the county. Finally, Section 7 outlines all of the grant exhibits. It's also where you will sign and date the agreement. The grant agreement must be signed and returned to DODD electronically. There are no major changes to the grant agreement this year. There are several attachments to the grant agreement. The first 2 must be completed and returned with the grant agreement. We'll look at these first. Addendum A. The Service Selection and Estimates Excel file is an important document that serves 2 purposes. 1. It outlines the service that a county will be allowed to bill throughout the course of the grant agreement. This allows us to properly configure rates in the Title 20 app, making the quarterly billing process much smoother. Second, this enables us to provide accurate and timely reporting information to JFS as required in the Comprehensive Social Services Profile. The Addendum A must be completed and returned to DODD with the grant agreement. It should be returned as an Excel file, not a PDF, thus it doesn't require a signature. Addendum B. This document is required for DODD to meet reporting requirements under the Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act, or FFATA. The purpose is to allow the public the ability to easily and accurately track public spending. The Addendum B must be completed and returned to DODD with the grant agreement. This should also be returned as an Excel file, not a PDF, and doesn't require a signature. The grant agreement Exhibits are reference documents, and these all provide guidance in specific areas. So let's touch on what you can find in each exhibit. Exhibit A, the Program Goals and Service Definitions document, outlines all of the Title 20 billable services, units, and rates. These are the services that we reviewed on a previous slide. The service definitions describe in detail what can and cannot be billed. Units are calculated in hourly increments, 15-minute increments, or one-way trips for transportation services. Additionally, the rate is standard regardless of the cost of the service provision. If your actual costs are greater or less than the standard rate, you will still be reimbursed at the standard rate. A quick note about early intervention. Last year, we revised the wording on the Special Services Early Intervention Service definition to help clarify questions about billable services. We have updated the language this year to avoid confusion. As before, the Title 20 definition is aligned with the Part C definition. Exhibit B, the Units of Service Log template is provided as an example of acceptable documentation. Section 3 of the grant agreement discusses documentation requirements in more depth. The form is not required. Your records can look different as long as it includes the required information. Exhibit C, the certification of proper billing form must be maintained locally for each service category provided to each individual. This form helps determine whether services provided to an individual can be billed to Title 20. Exhibit D, the General Service Provisions document provides specific guidance on several topics, such as calculating billing units, service rates, and subcontracting. Exhibit E, the quarterly reporting document outlines the technical and security steps needed to access the Title 20 web application and report quarterly expenditures. Finally, Exhibit F. This exhibit simply lists the grant expenditures that are prohibited by federal law. So let's review. The grant agreement, along with addendums A and B, must be completed and returned electronically by September 1st, 2016. Exhibit C should be maintained locally for each individual in each service. If nothing's changed on the Exhibit C, there is no need to recomplete the form. It only needs to be updated when a relevant change occurs. When returning your grant agreement, please be sure to return the Addendum A and Addendum B files as Excel files, not PDFs. We often receive questions related to the following areas. We'll briefly provide some information and guidance on a litany of topics. The first is privatization and subcontracting. A common question we receive is whether or not counties can subgrant or subcontract services to local providers. The answer is yes. DODD would continue the relationship with the county, and the county would continue to bill via the application, etc. Per Section 1.9 of the grant agreement, the subcontract should reference the Title 20 grant agreement, and the county retains its monitoring responsibilities. The way you dictate reporting, duties, and documentation responsibilities under Title 20 should be laid out in the agreement that you enter into. However, the details of those choices are made at the local level. You can refer to the language in Exhibit D for additional guidance. Changing services. A frequent question that we receive is, we'd like to offer a new service. How do we do that? The process is pretty straightforward. Whether it's adding a new service, removing a service, changing a service, simply contact the Title 20 manager at DODD about what services you'd like to add or change. Our office will send you an amendment template for your superintendent to sign. The county would then return the amendment template along with an updated Addendum A form to the Title 20 manager. Once the amendment is fully executed, DODD can then add the new services to the app so that they can be billed. User and sign-off roles in the Title 20 web application. Title 20 subrecipients must have at least one individual in each of these two roles, the user role and the sign-off role. We recommend having 2 people in each role so that a backup is available in case one person is absent or unable to access the application. The user role inputs data for quarterly reports, and then the sign-off role approves it. If you have any questions related to this, feel free to contact me. Unit calculation. Exhibit D has a detailed breakdown of how to calculate and round units of service. This slide just summarizes that information. Nothing is changing. There's nothing new. We've just included this for your reference as a quick guide to look back on. SAM registration and renewal. The System for Award Management, SAM, renewal process is fast, simple, and most importantly, free. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to complete this annual process. Some companies may reach out to you and attempt to secure payment for completing this process. Do not pay them. If you have any questions or issues about SAM or with the SAM registration process, you can contact the Title 20 manager. Double billing. In the instance of double billing federally funded programs, Medicaid and Title 20, for example, the department will collect the full amount of the error. If the error is discovered from the current federal fiscal year, then the county can simply resubmit the affected quarterly reports with updated information. The county's allocation and expenditures will be recalculated as normal. If the error is discovered from a prior federal fiscal year, then the full amount will be refunded to the federal government. Commingling federal funds. Section 3.8 of the grant agreement refers to the commingling of funds. While Medicaid is the most common funding source that you'll have to look out for, commingling includes all federal sources, such as early intervention Part C funds. Now we'll talk a little bit about questions that may come up. We often receive questions about whether or not a specific activity is billable to Title 20. While DODD offers guidance when possible, there are some scenarios where local discretion is more appropriate. Relying on your local policies and procedures, professional judgment, and experience is key. Here are some criteria that should be used to evaluate whether a certain service should be billed to Title 20. Does the activity align with one of the service definitions listed in Exhibit A? For example, would a provider working with a service coordinator qualify as a billable service under the EI definition? Checking the service definition would be the first step to answer the question. Is the activity listed on the ISP or IFSP? An activity has to fit within a service definition as well as be listed on one of these 2 documents in order to be billed to Title 20. How will the service be documented? If a service is difficult to document or explain, the county should consider whether it is worth the risk to bill the service. For example, we discourage counties from billing services that involve text message conversations, given the documentation challenges that exist. How many texts to include? How much time can be billed to texting, etc. Finally, how would local policies and procedures apply in similar situations? Local precedent can provide guidance for situations where the activity is clearly allowed by the ISP or IFSP, but something uncommon or strange happens. Let's look at a less straightforward example. Here's a common question that we receive. Can a provider bill early intervention if, after traveling to an individual's home, the family is not there? Let's walk through the criteria that we've established and see where it gets us. First, does the activity align with one of the service definitions? Clearly, an actual service, such as OT or PT, will not be rendered because the family was not home. However, the travel time for early intervention is billable to Title 20, as listed in the service definition. Next, is the activity listed in the ISP or IFSP in this case? In this case, you're confirming that the specialist was traveling to provide a service that is listed on the IFSP. Next, we'd consider documentation. Without the actual provision of a service, how would the county travel time or document the travel time? Finally, consider your local policies. Whether or not the county bills for Title 20 for the travel time must be a decision made by the county and based on whether there's sufficient support documentation for the travel time. We encourage counties to look at their local policies and procedures to make this determination. Before we wrap up, here's a brief overview of some important dates for the next few months. First, just a friendly reminder that quarterly reports for the third quarter of the current federal fiscal year, 2016, are due on Monday, August 1st. Grant agreements for the next fiscal year, 2017, will be distributed to the county boards before the end of July. Each county will receive an email with all of the appropriate files. Signed grant agreements, along with addendums A and B, will be due back to DODD by September 1st, 2016. Completed grant agreements must be returned electronically to jacob.foskel@dodd.ohio.gov. That email is listed on the slide, along with Excel versions of addendum A and B. We ask that you please return the completed agreements earlier if able, just in case there are unexpected issues. Additionally, we ask counties to update their security roles in the Title 20 web application by September 1st as well. This is just if somebody has moved or changed. We want to make sure that there's one security role both in the user role and the sign-off role. If you're all set, then there's no need to email us. The new grant agreements will go into effect on October 1st, and the rest of the slide contains deadlines for quarterly reports, both the reports that are remaining for federal fiscal year 2016 and all of the 2017 report deadlines. Additionally, DODD will soon send subrecipients a quarterly disbursement report after payments have been processed each quarter. This spreadsheet is designed to help counties track their actual allocations along with their actual payments as the fiscal year progresses. It's intended to provide subrecipients with accurate award data throughout the year. Finally, every spring, DODD sends a request related to the Comprehensive Social Services Profile, or CSSP. Counties will send DODD a copy of their updated Addendum A that incorporates revised service estimates. If service estimates haven't changed, then the county will simply notify DODD that everything is the same. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and look at some of the questions that have been submitted and get answers. The first question we're looking at is, when is the IDS data pulled? One practice has been to annually complete the certification of proper, that's a different thing. Sorry about that. The first question is, when is the IDS data pulled? We typically pull it at the end of the year, so it'll be pulled in January, and it'll be the December data. We try and align all of our data sources as much as possible. Most of the data is kind of on a year lag, so we try and keep it consistent so we have a consistent point in time that we're looking at the data. All right, the next question is, our practice has been to annually complete the certification of proper billing form for each individual annually. Is this necessary if nothing changes? So the answer is no, that's not necessary. You're of course allowed to do that, but if nothing changes, the only thing that determines whether or not you should update the form, there is a list on the certification of properability form that has different criteria that you would need to update the form. So if nothing's changed throughout the year, there's no need to update it unless you incorporate it into your annual practices. The next question is, are we able to send in screens from the presentation? Yes, that's the plan. We will be able to send a the copy of the video as well as the actual PowerPoint screen so that you can have the slides as reference documents. Okay, so we're going back to the allocation slide. And we've got a question related to that. So 1 second.
In the meantime, while Jacob goes back to that slide, someone asked if Tiffany Harlan is still the main contact, and Tiffany is still with us. She has just taken on a different program.
Great. So the question is, if we bill additional services, will our allocation increase at all? As we'd kind of mentioned before, I guess we'll go back to the slide before. The allocation is dependent on the data that we collect. So it's the, oh, 1 second. So these are the variables that impact a county's allocation. So whether or not you bill more or not won't necessarily impact your allocation. However, we encourage counties to bill what they can, just so we have a documented record of need and everything that the counties are working on. But this slide kind of outlines how the estimated allocations are determined.
But additionally, at the end of the year, if there are counties that do not bill enough to meet their allocation, that amount of money gets reallocated at the end of the year so that the counties who do bill more than their allocation could get extra money to cover those expenditures.
A question is related to the SAM guide, whether we can send that out. That shouldn't be an issue. We can add that to the list of materials that we distribute to counties as well. Another question is when the PowerPoint will be available. Our goal is to get everything out as quickly as possible. So we will ideally be able to get that to you soon. And we just want to make sure that we prepare all the materials at the same time so we don't send out several emails.
No, we're making more information.
Another question is about when the next round of audits will occur. We're not exactly, I don't think we really have information on that. It's not really our area. If you have more specific questions, we can kind of follow up on that. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh.
So the question is, if you redistribute the funds that other counties don't use, how do you determine what other counties will receive? I'm not sure I understand exactly the question. So basically what happens is during the course of the year, we allocate funding based on the allocation formula that's up on your screen right now. And then we do not reallocate until the very end of the year. At the very end of the year, we look to see who has, if there is money that can be reallocated, we look to see what counties have exceeded their allocation, by the amount that they've billed, and then that amount of money is redistributed through the same allocation formula. Does that answer your question, I hope? All right, we'll be on the line for as long as you guys need us. Right now we don't have any other questions coming in, but we can stay on the line for a while in case you guys think of anything else.
It looks like we've gotten all the questions. Again, if you think of something later, feel free to shoot us an email afterwards. And, oh, I guess we've got a couple really quick we'll look at. So the first question that's come in, did I understand that you can recoup monies from quarter to quarter? I thought that if you billed under, you could not. So the way it works is each quarter we'll look at everything that the county has spent, expenditures, and it'll bump up against your total cumulative year-to-date allocations. And essentially, each quarter will kind of recalculate that so that if you underbill in one quarter but overbill in another, if you still, at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, if your expenditures are greater than your allocations, you'll still get your full allocation amount. And then at the end of the year, once all that's set, whatever money is left over is then reallocated.
So just to go back, in history a little bit, I think that we've changed the way we do this. So yes, we did used to reallocate at the end of every quarter, so counties did not have an opportunity to make up for underbilling from quarter to quarter, and we've changed that. So now we look at your allocation from a year-to-date perspective. So it certainly is a much more intensive process here for us to do that, but we want to make sure that certainly the counties have an opportunity to recoup, their allocation. So we've changed our process. Okay, we've had a bunch of questions come in. If there were 5 counties overspent, maybe this is kind of part 2 of hold on, trying to go back. So if you have 10,000 left per se, you divide that per the application formula to all the counties exceeded their allocation. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if there's 10,000 unspent at the end of the year, that will be redistributed based on the allocation percentage to every county that has spent more than their allocation. Another question is, will we get a notification if we receive extra allocation? So traditionally, the estimated allocation amount is through the grant agreement. Through these new disbursement reports that we're planning on doing, we'll hopefully be able to give you a more real-time, accurate picture of actual allocations as they come in. Since we get updated award letters each quarter, that'll give us more information. So you should be able to get a better sense of that every quarter. I think we've got everything. If for some reason you have more questions or clarifications, please feel free to send us an email. We'll go back through and look through everything as well. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll try and get this information out to everybody fairly soon once we get everything compiled. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email me. I'll put up my email address here. Great. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to email me here. We'll send all the materials out through the listserv as well. And again, thank you so much for taking the time out. And we'll, again, if you have any questions, let us know. Thank you so much.